remain there as acting commanders until the parliament take their time.
So the Prime Minister
ratify.
becomes the Minister.
Mr. Mutalabi, I mean, there have been, to go back to my earlier point, a lot of people have criticized Nouri al-Maliki for perhaps seizing a little bit too much power even before this crisis kicked off.
May I say something, please?
Of course.
Working the politics of parliament is part of the job of the government. The government cannot work the politics of the parliamentarian politics. Is a failure government by itself. Part of the government's job is to manage the politics of the parliament and how to deal with the parliament. And if the government failed to do that, for any reason, there must be a problem, because the parliament and the government came out from the same deal in Erbil. And the Prime Minister of Britain or the Prime Minister of any democratic country will go to the parliament, convince them. If he fails to convince, he will resign, as far as I know. But to accuse the parliament, regardless of the backgrounds or the purposes, and go ahead and appoint division commanders, even in violation of the debathification law, even in violation of many laws in Iraq, because the parliament did not ratify, is a huge breach of the constitution, and it has reflected in the military failures recently, unfortunately.
Regardless of the failures of the army, the philosophical question here, was this a failure by the government or the parliament? The government has a duty to present the names of those who are enacting, taking position for those division heads, and send the names to the parliament. The parliament did not refuse the names. That is the failure of the parliament. The government can do so much as we have the first concept of democracy is the separation of authorities, the separation of the legislative body and the executive body. The legislative body cannot interfere, and the executive body cannot force the parliament to take a position. So, as he said, managing the parliament, that is not the job of the government. That's the job of the political parties.
It is the job of the government.
It's not the job of the government. That is
the commander-in-chief in Iraq.
No, that's meddling in the affairs.
To go to the parliament and talk to the parliament.
That's meddling in the affairs of the parliament. If we many times ask the parliament, please send an invitation to the Prime Minister to come and present the view. They say, no, we don't want him to come to the parliament. If we want him to come to the parliament, we want him on questioning, not to come and give us a view of what's happening.
Why not?
They refused. The parliament refused to invite the Prime Minister.
The questioning by the parliament is challenged. The questioning of the parliament
many
to
times
any minister
we said, question
or to the Prime Minister is challenged to the federal court. So now we have a loophole.
Yeah, of course, because it was baseless.
You
see, I can ask you for questioning on based questions, but when the federal court refused the parliament's reason for questioning the Prime Minister, that's again a failure of the parliament to come up with a correct questioning time. It was a political ploy to insult the government on baseless accusations.
I want to bring in some of our other guests into the discussion here. Mr. Sonar, I see you shaking your head several times there. Let's go back a little bit and talk about the current situation that we are in right now. What do you think the Iraqi Premier Nouri al-Maliki should be doing at this point?
Well, thank you for the invitation first, and seems like I'm seated right into the front here.
I'm glad you're sitting in the middle.
Well, am I kind of a peace force or something? Well, just a brief comment. The debate we just had seems to me a little bit ridiculous, actually.
Explain that, please.
Yeah, because as far as I can see it from Turkey, I mean, my colleagues here are much more informed and much better informed. I see the situation of a national emergency in Iraq right now. And it's a national emergency that not only concerns Iraq itself in its basics, in its foundations, but the whole region. And right now, discussing about who appointed what military and was it refused or not by the parliament and all this seems to me a weird debate. from our point of
Academic.
Huh?
Academic.
well, okay, academic, but I mean, we as politicians should really think about the responsibility that we bear. And do we have the luxury of having academic debates right now or not? I'm not in the situation to judge what Mr. Maliki should do right now. It would be an interference in Iraqi affairs, and that's beyond
Well, let's
my...
suppose you have to speculate. I mean, it's not necessarily a case of where you're suggesting what he should be doing, but rather what you think he should be doing in this sort of situation.
Well, what I see, as far as I can judge, what I see that he is actually doing, and what I do fully support, is he's trying to construct a national resistance against this terrorist attack, which is a terrorist attack directly against his government. Let's be clear on that. I mean, I don't know whether we will have the time to discuss about the reasons of this attack. It's not like ISIS. It's not an ISIS problem here. It's not a problem of some thousands of armed terrorists running around in provinces. As you said in your introduction, it's a geostrategical thing, and it is declared openly and clearly by even Mr. Barack Obama himself, the US president, that he would help on certain conditions. So ISIS here is used in a kind of mafia style. If you want my protection against this threat that you're facing, well, then you will have to fulfill certain conditions, which are named openly as well as the founding of a certain kind of Iraqi
Okay,
government.
let me stop you right there, because you bring up a very interesting point, and we will come back to the Americans and the Iranians and all of the other regional players. But I want to put another question to Mr. Kambar and Mr. Mutalabi here. Mr. Sona touched on a very important point there. He said that this is no time to be debating whose fault it was. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we are in this situation in the first place, the failure to come to some sort of national consensus over a number of very, very crucial issues. Do you think that this crisis has the potential to unify the rival political parties in Iraq?
Well, it's unified the people of Iraq. Until today.
Many would disagree with you, with all the respect, Mr. Watalabi, because people are saying that this is actually causing the level of sectarian tension that will lead to the partition of Iraq.
It's the proof for what I'm saying is until today we have exceeded 2 million volunteers. Now, the surprising number within the equation was the number of volunteers from Heat, Rawa, Haditha, and Ana, which are 100% Sunni enclaves. These 3 or 4 Sunni towns presented the highest number of volunteers to fight Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Again, adding that to the number of volunteers from the south, from the Midland and the south, present with a new picture of Iraq. A picture where the people believe today is we have a fight between evil and right. And we have the fight between ISIS and the government of Iraq and the people of Iraq. Today the people see the war as a conspiracy against Maliki himself. So they say that it's a fight between in a way they see it, that's the people I'm talking, they see it as a way that certain political entities have used ISIS as a tool to weaken the government, the central government or the federal government. And hence, I see, and I came this morning from Baghdad, and I see a tremendous support for Mr. Maliki, for Mr. Maliki's battle against ISIS, and by the way, which is a fight. Iraq is doing this fight on behalf of the world. Today, Iraq is the first line fighting terrorism and Al-Qaeda in particular and ISIS. Where if this, by the way, ISIS today is the richest terrorist organization in the world. They possess today $1.5 billion. With this money, day before yesterday, a cell was discovered in Spain. Before that, a cell was discovered in Italy. They are moving toward the world. So definitely, today is not the time to enter into political debates. Let's defeat ISIS.
Then without entering into political debate.
And if you have political grievances, we finish Daesh and we sit and talk
finish Daesh and then sit and talk about all the rest. Mr. Kambar, do you support Mr. Maliki in his fight against the ISIL?
Our priorities as follows. First, we have to protect Baghdad from this terrorist heinous terrorist attack.
Yeah, but do you support the Prime Minister in his current fight against these militants?
It's not the Prime Minister's fight, it's the Iraqi people's fight. It's bigger than the Prime Minister's fight. The Iraqi people...
Nevertheless, he is still the Prime Minister
fine,
of a
yeah.
country leading that fight.
Well, I agree with you, but this is far more. People has not volunteered because of Noor al-Maliki's fight. People has volunteered to protect holy sites, which ISIS in their speech, in their spokesman's speech, made it very clear they will target these holy sites, specifically Karbala and Najaf, and also attack of Baghdad. I don't think these sites will fall. I don't think Baghdad will fall. I think Iraqis are capable of defending Baghdad. I think Iraqis are excellent fighters. Every Iraqi has the capability to fight, and they are brave people. All Iraqis served in wars. Thanks to dictatorship, Saddam made all Iraqis part of his army. I served 5 years in the Iraqi army. I know the war. I know Iraqis can fight. However, the reason so this priority is number one. Number two, we have to hold people who made this failure happen accountable. Unless we do that, we cannot solve the problem.
So you're accusing the government of...
Look, 1967, in 1967, Israel in 5 days were able to occupy 5 times its area. And the Egyptian army collapsed within days. And that, the first thing has happened what? President Gamal Abdel Nasser appeared on TV and resigned and held himself responsible.
Okay, Mr. Khan, but I have to stop you right there because I want to get your thoughts on some of this, Paul, and you can have your word here. I mean, let's look at this group itself, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. How did they get to be so powerful?
I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, yeah, it's within 4 years. I mean, mentioning some of the figures earlier, I mean, it's $1.5 billion, $2 billion. I mean, they made this intelligence raid the other day where they found all this data. I mean, that is extraordinary in 4 years to get so big, so large. But this has come out of the situation in Syria as well as what's been happening within Iraq. And there's been the potential and the area and the territory and even local support for it to happen and grow within the north. I mean, everyone's focusing on this now and over the last week. But I mean, you know, they took Fallujah at the end of last year, beginning of this year. I mean, this has been slowly growing and slowly building. It's not suddenly come out of nowhere. They've not ridden down from the steps like sort of Genghis Khan here. You know, I mean, this is something that's been growing and building up. And I mean, with what, 1,000 troops, I mean, fighters, they were able to take a city against 30,000 soldiers. I mean, this is
30,000, more than 30,000.
Even 30,000. So I mean, yes, the Iraqis can fight, but then on the other hand, yeah, this is a small number taking on a huge and supposedly well-trained and well-equipped army. But they have a clear ideology. They have a clearly extremely well-organized, extremely well-structured organization, and they've been drawing on the experience of the last 30 years, from fighting in Afghanistan to fighting in Iraq against the Americans earlier in the decade. And then to the situation in Syria as well, has provided a lot of the space and the opportunity for this to spread. And this is the risk. Yeah, how far is this going to spread now?
Mr. Mutalabi, just very briefly, if I can get your thoughts on one point there. The Iraqi army was on the offensive in Anbar province towards the end of 2013 and for the most bigger part of this year. And then suddenly the Baghdad government has been thrown on the defensive. How did that happen?
I must agree with Mr. Qambar that we need to hold responsible the people who have caused this. Mosul has 22,000 local police. Those belong under law number 21 of 2006, belong to the governor. With the amended law of last year, the governor of Mosul controls the local police. 22,000 local police took off their uniform and put on the Daesh, the ISIS scarf. So there was no battle for the Iraqi army to collapse. There was a decision or orders given to the army to take leave. So the federal forces were given leave. The local police changed their uniform and burned their cars and started going around the city, declaring that Mosul had fell in ISIS' hand. So those commanders who yesterday were put on trial and taken out of the service, they definitely need to answer to the people of Iraq. And we must hold them responsible for their huge failure and treason to the country. So this is what actually happened. Now, I've been talking to some media agencies yesterday, and they had the notion that ISIS is marching from Mosul to Baghdad. That is not the case. What is happening is that local people in Salahdin, in Diyala, who are of a particular sect, they changed the uniform, and it's always local police. Local police took off the uniform and put on the ISIS masks and became, so there was no march of ISIS. ISIS is still the original one. It's still in Mosul. All the other areas is sympathizers and people who are in the Jaysh al-Islami, the Islamic Army, the 20th Brigade, and the Ba'athists, of course. By the way, this whole thing is led by the Ba'athists, and the proof for that, after the fall of Mosul, a huge banner with Saddam's picture and Izzat al-Duri was put on the governorate of Mosul for 1 hour until Daesh and ISIS came and brought it down. So there is a collaboration between the Ba'ath Party, ISIS, regional powers, and obviously somebody told the other forces in the area, i.e. the Peshmerga, to stand aside and just watch things as they develop.
Mr. Kambar, if I can get your response to some of that there. There are a lot of forces working against the Iraqi government in its fight against the ISIL, aren't there?
Well, I think his description of Saad is not very accurate what happened in Mosul. Besides the federal police, the Iraqi army also melted away, just like they disappeared, they did not fight, and a lot of them were executed.
I just said they were given leave,
yeah.
And there was no execution, by the way, of Iraqi army. All the footage, all the footage of the execution is unreal. There were 10 people executed,
what
but
I'm
the numbers,
say,
you talk about 1,700 of army executed.
My
this
question
is just part of the propaganda.
Is it okay if we question the commander-in-chief?
Of course, question him.
All right. That's
Question the commander.
Well, explain that. Expand on that.
I mean, the commander-in-chief has to be questioned. He's the top military man in Iraq, and he is commanding the whole Iraqi situation. It is very reasonable for people to question this leadership.
Yeah,
So
after we finish with the problem, after we remove
Yeah,
ISIS
sure,
from
I'm not saying.
then it is open, the ground is open, the political arena
I said the
will
priority
be
to
open, the parliament
I
will
agree with you. I
convene.
said priority
Yeah.
to protect Baghdad.
Yeah, exactly. The parliament will convene, and the parliament will have the full
What I'm trying to
full
say-
power to form a majority government and bring Maliki down. So there is no question. Mr. Maliki is an elected prime minister, and he can be re-elected or not elected. That is a decision to the new parliament. So yes, you want to question him, but not today. Let us not raise a divided front against ISIS and against some regional powers who are feeding on the differences of the different political Iraqi parties.
Well, thanks God to the fatwa of Ayatollah Sistani. He basically unified Iraqis as always before, and his fatwa to call for jihad against ISIS helped everybody to put their differences aside and prepare for a fight to protect Baghdad, and God help us, will probably liberate Mosul very soon. But what I'm saying, what has happened is a huge catastrophe at every level, and I think Iraq after Mosul, we're not going to be like Iraq before Mosul. I think this was a big blow to the Iraqis morally and militarily and security-wise, and this will threatening the whole region, the whole world. In your presentation at the beginning of this program, they said there are winners and losers. I really do think everybody is a loser in this. No country in the world and nobody will accept this dramatic, unfortunate things happening in Iraq, because it will have negative effect on every country in the region, including Syria, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Europe and the United States. I think the only winners here, or the only happy people, are the few killers of ISIS. aside of that, nobody is happy.
Okay, gentlemen, we are going to have to jump to a very quick break right now, but we're going to be right back in a few minutes and continue our discussions on the crisis in Iraq. Stay with us. Welcome back to this special edition of Between the Lines. Just a reminder, we're talking about the ongoing crisis in Iraq and the recent militant advances in the north of the country. I want to bring in our panel of experts now. Mr. Soner, we touched earlier on some of the regional contributions to this ISIL advance. Can you be more specific? What states are supporting this militant group?
Well, just look at what states are using it. What states are capitalizing on the advance of the ISIS? Who is using the threat of ISIS to march towards Baghdad, true or not, exaggerated or not, or what states are even exaggerating it via their media? Above all, it's the US and Israel. Let's be clear on that this is part of the general plan of dividing Iraq into now 3 parts with the Sunni territory, and in short term influencing the Iraqi government. The Turkish government in this process, if you ask for that part, is accompanying the process without having clear orders what to do. They are like
sort of like Pakistan during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, a route for weapons and the CIA and the
our
Americans.
council is kidnapped and there's no clear reaction what to do. Even some government members say he's not kidnapped, he's taken in custody. That was said by Vice Foreign Minister, I think, publicly, that this council is not even kidnapped. So they're all the time waiting for orders to come from Washington and Brussels.
Okay, I'll come back to you in a moment because we are going to talk about Turkey a little bit further in depth. Paul, I want to bring you in here. This group, the ISIL, we're no longer talking about terrorists that are interested in hijackings or carrying out car bombings. These guys are interested in territorial expansion because if we look at what they've done over the last couple of years, they're practically stretching from the Mediterranean all the way towards the borders of Iran.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this almost in quite a long-term period. I mean, if you look at sort of a lot of jihadi literature, radical Sunni literature and some things like this, I mean, it's been moving gradually more and more from the peripheries, from Afghanistan, Pakistan. It's getting closer and closer to the center, which is Saudi Arabia, the Holy Land, here,
Who does
this
that benefit?
area.
Who is benefiting from that? Who is supporting this group in its quest of this massive expansion
This is
across
the sort
the
of,
region?
the trillion-dollar question in many ways. I mean, there's mere speculation in so many ways. I mean, we have clear states that would benefit from.
Well,
some
Mr.
of
Soner
this.
just pointed out a few players there. He didn't make it sound like speculation. He made it sound like fact.
Let's look on the history of this,
Yes.
of these terrorist organizations. You named it. It started with the so-called, that was the historical Cold War concept of green belt around the Soviet Union, which erupted then in Afghanistan, and then it came closer to the Near East, and it's always heading towards the nation states which are somewhat resisting certain Western concepts.
Well, let's be clear. The Shia axis, the resistance, isn't that right?
No,
The opposite.
no, I do not agree with it. In practice, the Shia axis is like the one attacked, but the attack is not against what is Shia axis. The attack is against what is resisting Western interests. That's a difference. That means, for example, if you tomorrow have a different government in Turkey that does not comply with what the West proposes, then it will be attacked as well. And Turkey is not a Shia country. So therefore, Shia axis is a wrong description of the problem. And Afghanistan, as far as I know, is not a Shia country. Neither.
It's a percentage.
There is a small percentage of a
Well,
Shia population,
okay.
but it's actually
Pakistan.
majority Sunni. Paul, please go ahead. Your response to
Yeah,
some
in
of that
terms
there.
of, I mean, I think it's being pushed increasingly into very much a sectarian war, which, I mean, I've heard flippantly called in Washington D.C. as a sushi war, Sunni Shia, and and they use it seriously. It's not just flippantly.
I like
but it's,
sushi.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a very, very serious and deadly thing that is going on, and it is creating massive divisions and splits within the region that is going to cut through the whole area. And as this moves increasingly from the periphery in, but I think it's not just necessarily states who are backing and pushing this. This comes from individuals who've been donating and doing things, and comes into a greater ideology. What necessarily the end goal is here is not clear. But I think it is, I mean, as I was saying, I mean, this is moving further and further into the region, dividing up the region, and then it's very much against the Western allies in the Gulf, who have money, have the oil, have everything like this. They want this to change gradually, but at the same time, it's these very countries that actually bankrolled a lot of these guys back in the 80s and 90s. It's now really very much
Well, according to
blowback.
Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, Mr. Mutalabi, it's not just the 80s and 90s, it's still going on right now. He pointed out, he said Saudi Arabia, he said Qatar, he named them on more than one occasion.
Which country had a relationship with Taliban from the Gulf? Well, somebody remind me, other than United Arab Emirates, they had an embassy of Taliban.
And Qatar has right now,
and,
even.
and
to a
Qatar
degree.
right now. So it's the view is quite clear when you're inside fighting the actual problem. There is a new plan for the region. Now, what the new plan consists of, but the point is, where I would disagree with the gentleman is that this is to protect those who are having a traditional or conservative form of life in the Middle East. The countries that are immune to ISIS are Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. The countries who are under fire are the progressive states, the states that have already moved towards Western style life, believe in democracy, believe in sharing the wealth among the people, believe in the freedom of speech. Iraq, basically. And Syria was kind of moving into, it is kind of a different environment, but the way the Syrians were thinking was a secular state, far away from extremism thought, and then it was attacked. So I don't believe in that there is a protection of Western style against those who believe in. It's an immune. Those states like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf are immune to ISIS.
Well, you say immune, but
we see Yemen. We see Yemen, which are we all remember South and North Yemen, a communist South, and those countries have ISIS and Al Qaeda. Where we don't see that in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or United Arab Emirates
Well,
or
let's
Qatar.
Let's touch on a very important point here, Mr. Kambat, if I can get you in here. you know, we're all talking about the Saudis perhaps standing behind these ISIL militants, but there's no real love lost here. The ISIL has recently been classified as a terrorist organization in Saudi Arabia, as a matter
I'll
of
tell you
fact.
one thing. I thought speaking academically was prohibited when we talk against the government, but now everybody's talking academically. So I'm going to be academic now. I think ISIS is a serious new phenomenon. I think ISIS is the new Al-Qaeda. ISIS is not answerable to any country. The reason, and we have indicated this over a year ago.
But no one is saying that, Mr. Kambar. We're simply
Let me-
implying
let me just finish.
that the support coming from some of these states
Yep.
has made these groups possible. I
Yeah.
mean, let's face it. If
Let-
we
let-
cut
let
off
me
the,
finish my
if we
thought.
choke off the
Let
lifeline.
me finish my thought. The economical independence plays a huge role in the fate of any organization, whether it was a terrorist organization or a liberation organization. Now ISIS is capable of producing 100,000 barrels of oil a day for the past 2 years from the Syrian fields east of Syria. And that is providing them with almost approximately $5 million a day. Not to mention they have entered into
May I interfere with the question? That's true what you say, that they're producing oil, but you need to turn this oil into money. So
Who's
someone
buying
has
it?
someone
Who's
has to
buying it?
buy it.
Believe me,
Someone-
if
and I
you're
don't think
selling,
that this is the
if you're
local
selling
Syrian
oil
market.
at half its price, you'll find many buyers, including very respectable governments.
Yeah, but
Listen,
But it
this is
still requires
there's-
a
but
degree
there's
of
no
logistical
lag to the
support.
point.
doesn't
Let me
no,
finish.
because Syrian oil
This
is
is
a
you
true.
have
special
to,
What
you
I'm
have to get
saying-
the oil to the market,
Well,
and you have to capitalize it. So
listen,
this is not like
Sir, let me finish my thought. Any government who wants to support a terrorist group or a liberation group or an armed group, they don't care much about money, to be honest with you. They don't need to buy oil from ISIS to help them. They can just offer them money without buying it. But ISIS used this oil to be independent and not answerable. And that is the proof on the ground. The fierce fighting between ISIS and the Nusra Front, which is openly supported by Saudi Arabia, is a clear sign. The clear signs of the leader of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, what's his name? I remember his name now.
Zawahiri?
Zawahiri. He called them as against the real Qaeda, and they have to be fought and they have to be stopped. That was very clear in many messages by Zawahiri. They are fighting with the Free Syrian Army. They are fighting against all the groups, the anti-Syrian government groups, including the one that is supported by the Turkish
Yeah,
government.
and that can certainly.
So what I'm saying, the other thing, if you go in the details of the new structuring of ISIS led by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the new structure of it, the leadership of it is 90%, if not all, are Iraqis. And they are, most of them, if not all of them, former Iraqi officers, intelligence officers, army officers, Republican Guard officers, and they have managed to establish a very effective military and security structure. This style of Al-Qaeda has never been seen before. They are independent financially.
Okay, let's
They
look at
are
what
very
some of
well
that means.
equipped.
Mr. Sonar, what are we talking about here? Are we
That's-
talking
that's,
about...
That's an interesting thing, because you have a huge publicity campaign going on for the ISIS, and I'm not.
I hope I'm not one of them.
Well, yeah, well, in a way, yes, you are. In a way, yes, you are. It's not to criticize you personally, but when I also read the Western newspapers like New York Times and all these, it's like the ISIS
They are making gains on the ground every day in Syria.
gaining on the ground every day. They have billions of dollars. They have effective structure. When I listen to this gentleman here, he shows me a different picture. He says people in villages put off their police clothes, put on some ISIS symbols, and they turn into a kind of local mafia. So this is very different.
Which is the truth. This is exactly what is in Iraq. I'm talking within the areas of either mixed sectarian or single sect. The local police today is the backbone and the body, with leadership of ex-military Saddam. I'll give you an example in Adem, the village of Adem. Suddenly it became Daesh, ISIS. So the locals start fighting them, and reinforcement came, and they start bombing. There was a battle going on. So the local sheikhs came from them to the army and said, "Could you please stop shelling us?" I said, "Well, we're not shelling you, we are shelling ISIS." They said, "Well, we are ISIS, so you are shelling the people." Then the government said, well, the truth there, they said, "Well, we're going to continue shelling the positions of ISIS until you surrender those officers who put on Saddam's uniform and came paraded in front of the police headquarters."
Well, ISIS are able to buy out all the Saddam's retired
Yes.
Officers were wearing dishdashes and hiding under the ground and ready to fight and full of hatred, and they want to revenge, and they were able to invest in them. I mean, I like to tell Mr. Yunus, I don't have the habit of underestimating my enemy. Underestimating the enemy does not make your enemy weak. You have to. We know that those people are vicious, and they have started very recently. I mean, relatively speaking, ISIS has appeared a few years ago, and today they are started to dominate almost all the Iraqi-Syrian border.
Yeah, but their main name came out to the headlines is because what happened in Mosul. In Syria, they were marginalized. They were under pressure from Nusra and the Free Army and the Syrian army. So it's today they became a name because what happened in Mosul. Because of I think there is a regional game here.
Okay, let's look at some.
And
of
I'm
that.
sure Turkey is involved. It's a problem.
Let's talk about. If we can talk about
I believe that
Turkey.
Turkey is involved in one way or another.
Mr. Sona, it's very interesting that these advances by the ISIL came just a few days after the Iranian president, Sheikh Hassan Rouhani, actually visited Turkey. What's Turkey's role here exactly?
Well, Turkey has been supporting ISIS in Syria. That's known by everybody. And Turkey the Turkish government, let's say, I would separate that because there is no popular support for ISIS or nothing. And there is no popular support for the Turkish government's policy towards Syria nor Iraq right now by the population. But the government has supported ISIS in Syria, and just a week ago, now it has been 2 weeks, that the ISIS has been put on a terror list. Meanwhile, yesterday, al-Nusra was taken off that list officially,
Al-Nusra is Al-Qaeda, by the way.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
The conventional Qaeda.
Which is a conventional,
the conventional
Qaeda.
ISIS is the neo-Qaeda.
Yeah, the neo-Qaeda, it's interesting that Turkey take out al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda from their terrorist list. It's really interesting.
The Turkish government basically, in my judgment, plays the role of the prolonged arm of the coalition of Saudi Arabia and Israel here. Why like this? Because we have a very dependent economy on capital imports. We are not an oil-rich country, so we have deficit balances. We receive frequent investments from the Gulf countries, above all from Qatar and from Saudi Arabia. And in exchange, we do support their policy actively in infrastructure towards Syria, and now a little bit also towards Iraq.
Okay, you mentioned oil there. That's a point that I want to talk about further. Paul, I want to bring you in here. Now, just before the crisis, Turkey and the Iraqi Kurds announced the sale of over $1 billion of Kurdish oil, of course, without Baghdad's consent. We all know how that crisis played out. What do you think Ankara is looking to do here? Are they looking to carve out some sort of energy security for themselves at the expense of a unified Iraq?
Yeah, I think to a degree, but I mean, it's also they're having to play this very carefully as well, because they're not exactly overly keen on the Turkish Kurds having their own state, or equally a Kurdish state springing up in Syria. It's good plain economics, and good oil deals there to be had, as well as securing things. But then, there's been a lot of pipelines that were planned, such as the Nabucco pipeline that was supposed to go through Turkey that never happened. Other plans for pipelines from Iran, or equally though to come through Iraq, that have not happened. The Arabian gas pipeline that went through Syria was supposed to be going to Turkey, also stopped just a couple hundred kilometers from the border because of the conflict in Syria. So this is another solution, another way around it.
And through that solution, Mr. Soner, they're using the Kurds. I mean, there seems to be an alliance developing here.
That's not really true. Yes, there is the argument of economical benefit via this oil, but we in Turkey have been listening to this argument since the 80s, at least. This argument was first presented to the then Prime President of the state, Turgut Özal, by the United States, who tried to convince him to take over some kind of protectorate of the northern Iraq, of the Kurdish region, and in exchange receive all the oil. So this is kind of a story that we in Turkey listen to since the 80s at least. Let's help the northern region and we will be oil rich. But this is not the real motive behind it, because everyone in Turkey knows that if you realize the most radical version of this plan, northern Iraq will be part of Turkey first, uniting different Kurdish
Hard to
parts.
imagine how Kurds would ever agree to something
Well, they
like
would
that.
agree. They would agree. They support this in part because their argument is, under the protectorate of Turkey, they can unite different parts of Kurdish territories and then separate themselves all at once from Turkey. So they would agree in that. And in Turkey, it's well known that governing these territories that have the northern Iraqi oil would only be some years of oil, and then these territories and part of Turkey would be gone. But these are plans that are not realizable. This is all.
Okay, aside from Turkey, Mr. Kambat, has this recent crisis and what we've seen over the last couple of weeks especially given the Kurds hope that they are headed towards statehood?
I don't think any. We in the Iraqi opposition worked with the Kurds very closely, and we still have very good and close relations with the Kurdish leaders. I never heard any Kurdish leader saying we're going to be independent, nor they are planning to be independent. That all falls in the speculation thing and sometimes conspiracy theories. But on reality, on the ground,
you're not following the news very well, my
no,
friend.
I'm do.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised you say
I
that
do.
Because actually, it's a number of times now, Mr.
But I didn't finish.
Barzani.
I didn't
Mr.
finish.
Masoud
I didn't
Barzani
finish.
said,
I didn't finish
Yeah.
until recently. The mishandling of the government by the relation with the Kurdish region, the mishandling of the government of the foreign policy, including the relation with Turkey, gave a gift to the Kurdish government.
Would you agree?
I didn't interrupt.
No, you say
you.
mishandling. You say mishandling. Would you agree to Kurdistan exporting oil as they wish? Would you agree that we pay them 17% and give them the price of the excavating the oil and themselves exporting their oil as they wish? And would you accept that Arif Taifour come on TV and say we are not going for federation, we are going for confederation? So if you agree with those demands, then we have a different story altogether.
I don't agree with the government cutting the salaries of Kurdistan for 4 months.
That's not true.
It's true.
No, that's not true. The salaries of Kurdistan paid by the 17% of their national
budget. I
budget.
don't agree with the government.
They didn't agree to the national budget, hence they could not pay the
difference
workers. That is not true at all.
Oil was
That's not true. Every year we have a national budget.
I'm surprised, Saad. You just said we have to put our differences aside to fight terrorism. And now we need the Peshmerga to help us to fight terrorism.
They will never help you.
How come you change
They will never help
so
you, my
quickly?
friend. They will never help you.
Don't we need to put our differences aside to fight terrorism? Don't you think
will
so?
never
But
help you.
to put the differences aside should not mean that
sell out to Peshmerga.
using the ISIS to renegotiate the relations between
No, not
central
using.
government.
Exactly.
I can show you
And that's what
videotapes
Peshmerga is doing.
of Peshmerga
there you come to
defending
the
Iraqi cities
capitalizing.
from ISIS. And the Peshmerga
they stole the
fought
army
Saddam
tanks.
for 35
They
years.
stole the tanks.
And the Peshmerga hosted all Iraqi opposition in Kurdistan for decades,
Look, I
including
was
the
there.
Dawah party.
Look, I was there.
And
I
the
was in
Peshmerga
Kurdistan, okay?
also
But that
still-
doesn't mean they can steal our army.
Well,
I was in
I thought we
Kurdistan.
should put our differences now and we talk about these issues later.
Well, talking
you
about,
said-
speaking of putting your differences
If I
aside,
talk
mean, we
about
have-
the government
we
that
have-
I'm being too academic,
Yes.
and I'm talking against the government,
If I
I'm
can
talking
just-
about
if
differences.
If I can just, if I can put this point to you, Mr.
What I'm
Kambar,
saying-
the Kurdish Prime Minister, Mr. Barzani, of course, he said
Najib
on BBC just a couple of days ago, he said that this is that the Kurds and the Sunnis should form their own federal state. I mean, this
the
isn't.
constitution gives you the right to form a federal state.
But is this
Yeah,
no
but not
time
in a
to be
war
talking?
zone. Not while Daesh is fighting us. We have a constitutional form, a peaceful manner to
Okay,
form,
nobody
to form,
thought-
provinces.
I will tell you something. States are not.
Okay, Mr.
founded-
Sonar, I have to stop you there. We are going to come back to this discussion in a moment, but right now we do have to jump to another quick break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the special edition of Between the Lines. We're discussing the ongoing crisis in Iraq, and now back to our panel of experts. Before the break there, we were talking about the Kurds, an intense discussions, I might say. Mr. Mutallabi, are the Kurds fighting for Iraq as a whole, or are they fighting for a piece of it?
No, they're definitely fighting for a piece of it. We have a definite problem with Masoud Barzani. We don't have a problem with Kurds as such. We don't have a problem with PUK, the other branch of the Kurdish, who look at the Kurdish issue realistically. They don't want to create a state that will be in a constant conflict with its neighbors. Because that's what Kurdistan today, if it becomes independent, it will become. In a constant battles or conflicts with Iran, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, definitely. All routes cut. So it doesn't look realistic. But Mr. Masoud Barzani, on a number of occasions, threatened that the right of determination has been speculated in the constitution, and the Kurds should have the right to self-determine their future away from. Then they start speaking of the confederation with Turkey, which that is the worrying part. Confederation with Turkey, that means becoming independent from Iraq and linking themselves. One of my Turkish friends said, we will not allow that because that will mean the sources of water in Turkey will be at the hand of the united Kurdish state. So I do believe that there is a dilemma here, but we cannot forget all decisions in the area, in the region. We have important players. We have the American player and we have the Israelis. And those two players are definitely have a particular plan in Turkey, which could be a way to destroy Turkey, a future way to destroy. And don't say, when I was younger, I thought it would never be talking about a federal Iraq and an independent Kurdistan. Now it's becoming reality. So don't be surprised, my friend, if the Americans do have such a plan to destroy Iraq and Turkey, because after all, Turkey isn't exactly following the American dictating of events.
Mr. Kambar, let's face it, I mean, Baghdad and Erbil have never been on good terms. That's putting it mildly, in fact. Do you think this recent crisis...
As far as I'm concerned, we've been in good terms, no problem.
Well, that's not entirely the case. I mean, there have been a lot of disputes between the central government and the KRG. But first, I want to ask you, do you think that this recent crisis has given a certain level of leverage for the KRG over Baghdad?
It has given the security apparatus and the Peshmerga leverage because they are successful to fight terrorism. They were able to keep their region secure.
Yeah, because they have a dictatorship. Yeah, of course, they have a dictatorship. Full stop.
Yeah,
if Maliki had the same powers that Masoud Barzani have and his sons running the country themselves, yeah, if you give it to me, I know what to do with Daesh and all the other. But we have a democracy in Iraq. Maliki cannot exceed the rights that are given to him by the constitution. Masoud Barzani does whatever he wants. A journalist only said, I would be, all my problems in life will be resolved if I marry Mr. Barzani's daughter. He was kidnapped in the street and cut to pieces. A journalist. This is the type of government we have in Kurdistan. So definitely there will be security.
Mr. Kambar,
Saddam Hussein was like that.
You're talking about them securing their own territory, but it's not just their own territory. I mean, we've seen them go into Kirkuk, which is essentially disputed territory, is it not?
We need their help at this moment. I mean, Jalal.
You think they're going to leave when this crisis is over? You don't think they're going to want to claim Kirkuk for themselves? I mean, let's be honest. They've always considered Kirkuk what they call the Kurdish Jerusalem.
It's a disputed area, and this dispute has been open to the public. Is not a secret. They think Kirkuk should be part of Kurdistan. This debate can be solved through the constitution and through political means, but to accuse the Kurds of being against Iraq or conspiring against Iraq is something unacceptable.
They were not accused. If I might defend my colleague here to the right, he made a very important difference between the Kurds as a population and Mr. Masoud Barzani on the other hand as a political leader, and he criticized Masoud Barzani, and in fact Masoud Barzani's survival is depending on this issue. His mission, his raison d'etre, his being a politician,
so what do you
depends
propose
on exactly
so
on
what do you
dividing.
propose?
Well, I don't need to
solve
propose. I don't
to
need
the problem solve the problem of ISIS in Iraq.
Well,
that's a good question. What's the alternative?
Go curse Masoud Barzani day and night, and ISIS will leave.
I don't need to propose because I can see the future.
Well, the future is those are our strategic allies, and we have overthrown.
They are more than your strategic allies. They are part of the Iraqi people.
I don't think you can. I don't think you have the right as a Turk to speak on behalf of the Iraqi people and describe them dangerous.
I have several Kurdish friends. I also kind of have an insight into the consciousness of these people, and these people are people who have heart, who have soul, who have feelings for the land they live in and for the people on the side. And I'm speaking of the broad population, not of Barzani style politicians. And these people, when they see that a group like ISIS attacks and devastates the country, the population will not stand aside. So
it's not the
Barzani,
population which is fighting ISIS.
So
it's the Peshmerga under the command of the Kurdish government.
Yeah, but
supporting the Iraqi army. And when Mr. Maliki gave his speech, the first speech after the fall of Mosul, to his right was one of the main leaders of the Masoud party standing to his right, which is Rosh Shawish. and all government.
That was the cabinet meeting.
The cabinet meeting. And the government of Iraq and the government of Iraq so far have has a very thankful stance towards the stance of the Kurdish Peshmerga in supporting the Iraqi army in expelling ISIS. What is our priority now? Who's our enemy? If we find who's our enemy, it will be great. See, one of the Americans' mistakes made in Iraq, they didn't know who their enemy is, and their enemy was changing every time, and that's why they lost Iraq. At the beginning, their enemy was the Ba'ath Party, then the Mahdi army.
Let me express
so
one
what I'm
very,
saying,
very
our
basic
enemy
historic
today,
thing.
our main enemy today, the most dangerous enemy today that could kill us all, even in Turkey, even in Ireland, they could go and do terrorism, are ISIS. And we have to fight them, and they are our priority. And I agree with your lecture on me at the beginning. We need to put our differences aside and not becoming too academic. Okay, I'm using your words.
And putting these
fight
differences to support you, to put these differences aside not only inside Iraq but regionally. On this conflict,
this is an Iraqi problem, Mr. Yunus. My friend,
Sure.
this is number one to me.
But
I'm an Iraqi.
it seems that the
Maybe I'm
government in
obsessed with
Baghdad.
Iraq,
Okay,
but-
Mr.
but
Kambar,
sure.
it seems.
This is
If I
an
can just
Iraqi
stop you right there
issue.
for a moment, there's
And I
one
tell you,
important point that I need to bring up. There's
every
another
single
important
second-
point that I need to bring
Hold
up.
on a
Just a
second,
moment,
please.
Mr. Kambar. If I can just bring up a very important point.
Let
It's
me
not-
say one thing, please.
It is.
Every single security problem in any country in the world starts from internal changes.
Okay, that's a fair point.
but-
Paul, let me bring you into discussion here for a moment. We're talking about an internal problem, but there's, of course, a lot of regional players involved here. Iran, for instance, has vowed to protect the religious Shia shrines in Iraq. Do you think that Washington and Tehran can cooperate, can reach some sort of a compromise over getting involved in Iraq?
I think they maybe could. I mean, it's sort of strange bedfellows, right? But I mean, is this necessarily the right solution? I think the big danger sort of here is, of course, if there's an attack on Karb al-Najaf, I mean, the Shia are going to go literally bananas all over the place about this. And I mean, but then if you crack down super hard on ISIS and totally wipe them out, you're going to anger a lot of Sunnis as well. And this is going to heighten tensions between the two even more. And I mean, especially I think if the Iranians go in, I mean, this opens up another whole bag of, whole bag of worms here, and you've got another whole major problem. I mean, I had emails from Shia Kashmiri friends the other day after the attack, really concerned about what's going on. I mean, they're in Kashmir, they have their own issues there, but they're also thinking about what's going on. So this
Okay,
is
Mr.
becoming
Mutalabi,
a bigger
I
and
see you
bigger.
shaking
It's a
your head
religious.
there.
If I may say one thing,
If I can just
the
jump over,
Soviet
if I can
Union
just jump over to
cooperated with
Mr.
United States
Mutalabi, I
against-
want to get your thoughts on Iran's involvement. Is there a potential threat here that Iran's involvement could further exacerbate these sectarian tensions in Iraq?
At present time, yes. At present time,
I think it's already happening.
no, as an official kind of assistance from Iran, I think it will become today an additional problem. Iran could help with one major way. If they could return to us some of our jet fighters. We have in Saddam's time, Saddam deposited number of jet fighters in Iran. MiG-23 and MiG-29. I don't think we need the MiG-29, but MiG-23s. If they could return those to us, that would be, these are Iraqi planes. These are not Iranian planes. These are Iraqis landed in Iran at the time of the war and stayed in Iran ever since. If they return those to us, this will give us the capability to attack our targets and not being in this position that we are asking the Congress to give us our fighters and the Congress dragging their feet. So that kind of help, that would probably assist us without implicating the Iranians directly in the battle in Iraq.
Mr. Sonar, why is that? Why has Washington has promised Baghdad a great deal of help in its fight against the militants? Why has the U.S. been dragging its feet, as Mr. Mutalabi said?
well, they're trying to put a feet into the government, into the Iraqi government. That shows how weak the American position on the other side also is. We remember that the US has been used to invade countries. Now they are using ISIS just to have some political forces that sympathize with them included into the future Iraqi government. That's a very, very decent position, I might say. But still, they have their foot in there. But they will not. They are not part of the solution. They are part of the problem.
I'm also
First,
surprised.
let me finish that. Sorry. You say it's an Iraqi problem. Definitely, it's above all an Iraqi problem. Iraq is the country which is now damaged fiercely by these terrorist attacks. But so was Syria. And so, to a much lesser degree, also Turkey. We also had, remember, terrorist attacks connected with these groups in Turkey. And we are also facing some threat of a sectarian divide.
Yeah, Benny would say that the worst is yet to come for Turkey.
Yeah. So this is a problem of all of us. And this is a problem that will unite us. This is a problem that we have to solve. I mean, we should also talk about solutions. We should also offer your audience solutions, or at least what we think what is the solution, besides of accusing this or that, parliament or government, all this. And the solution is, I would say, a regional initiative led by the Iraqi government, which is the closest political actor here, supported by the Syrian government, which has its own experiences with ISIS and all the other groups, and supported in the second line with Iran and Turkey. What can Iran and Turkey do here? Above all, I would talk about Turkey. Cut off the lines. We know that ISIS oil and ISIS money and ISIS personal supply and in part also weapons come through the Turkish border. They used to come to Syria. I guess they are now passed through Syria to Mosul and wherever. So our part at first is to cut off that. And I'm calling all of you to imagine just the photography. The foreign ministers of Iraq, of Syria, of Iran, and of Turkey sitting on one table to discussing a common strategy against ISIS. Just this reunion
Okay, Mr.
itself.
I mean,
will finish the problem.
that's a very optimistic
And very ambitious.
and very ambitious plan there.
The 2 points I wanted to speak, actually. The first one was the latest comments by Mr. Obama when he referred very bitterly on the lawn of the White House that the Iraqis failed to allow us to stay in Iraq. And now they're asking us for help. That was a very bitter comment, which I thought hid behind it volumes of politics. So we cannot speak about it until Mr. Obama comes and clarify the issue. The second point that I would like to speak about is that Iraq definitely needs to revisit its international relationship and to reevaluate its regional relationship and standards and how to reorganize Iraq's regional relationship, because there are important countries in the region with direct influence in Iraq. Turkey, i.e. Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, even Qatar and the Gulf states. So I think we need a new diplomatic onslaught to be on the offensive diplomatically, trying to gain some access into these new, completely virgin fields for us, because everybody's turned against the policy of Iraq to whatever reason that policy is, sectarian, religious, national, oil production, increasing of oil production, Iraq's potential for leadership in the area. All these could be reasons that Iraq is being targeted. So therefore, I think the Iraqis should take this opportunity to reevaluate their international relations.
Mr. Kambar, what are your thoughts on some of that? We're talking about the region here and Iraq in that region. Is Iraq a victim of the region or a player in the region?
Well, I think our own success will lead people to stand by us. However, at this difficult, dangerous junction now we are passing through in Iraq, I think we need help of our allies. We have a strategic alliance with the United States of America, as the Iraqi government signed a treaty, and we have a neighborhood and a strategic alliance also with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I think we welcome help from those countries to fight ISIS. I think in history there are examples of such cooperation. The Soviet Union was cooperating with the United States in fighting the Nazi Germany, and I think we are going to witness that. I don't think we need troops. Iraqis can fight. We have foot soldiers and officers and brave people enough to do that. I think we might need logistical support or intelligence support or training. And I think at this point, we welcome any support from any friend.
Paul, closing arguments here, looking into the future, your crystal ball, what does Iraq look like in the next couple of months?
I really need a crystal ball for that, really, I think. I think one way that this can partly be solved is by having a truly cross-section of Iraqi society in the army who's generally fighting against ISIS. That's not just made up of just Shia over the majority of fighters Shia. It has to be including nationalist Sunnis and other sects and groups. That way it's not seen overly as a war on the Sunnis, I think, and also on the Sunni extremism. And I think here if the United States gets involved, even whether using drones or planes, this can backfire seriously. And that would make the situation even worse. I think closing the borders with Turkey, making them super secure and tight, it's been a sort of open market to just come into Turkey, which is, has clearly been allowed at the state level. It's all connected also to Syria and what's going on in there. And this is where you have massive political divisions, and this is going to stop a regional unity. So I think, things are probably not going to be very good unless that there is seriously a strong response that takes a lot of the issues and the of Sunnis and others that feel that they've not been represented by Baghdad, and that is a genuine sort of coalition, national coalition, to push this issue. Otherwise, I think it's going to spill and get potentially worse.
Okay, on that slightly pessimistic note, gentlemen, I'm afraid we have run out of time on this week's edition of the show. I want to thank all of my guests, of course, Mr. Saad Mutalabi, Mr. Yunus Sonar, Mr. Intifat Kambar, and of course, Mr. Paul Cochran. Thank you very much for being here tonight. And I want to thank all of you for watching. Of course, don't forget that we're going to be back next week with a new edition of the show. Goodbye for now.
What happened is a regional ominous conspiracy that has been planned and financed over meetings backed by a massive media war, as you see now. Unfortunately, some local parties cooperated with the countries that do not want to see a strong Iraq. But I would say to those and to our brothers and friends that the terror will not stop at Iraq's borders.
People who are capable of carrying arms and fighting the terrorists in defense